Okay, so this is something a little bit different, as in that this video started life before the fire at Manorwood HQ. You're going to see that I'd done most of the laminating and preparing the cuts and the measurements, dimensions, etc. I just hadn't cut the tenons. Somehow the parts survived the fire, even though they were right next to it and there was loads of water thrown at them from the fire brigade, etc. They were then stored with all the other stuff just in a quick manner in the barn. I pulled them out almost 8-9 months later, replaned them, cut the tenons finally, and assembled them, as you can see here. This is the full story before the fire to the final finish. So I don't know if on one of the videos I showed you maybe a year ago, I bought a job lot of English oak. This is what you're looking at here, some of it. This was from a local chap, a farmer actually. He spotted me doing my woodwork when he was cutting some hedges. Said would I be interested. He had a lorry load of oak. This is it. It's English oak, cut within about 2 miles of my workshop, stored for about 10 years. He didn't end up using it. I bought the lot, and after the fire, I thought this was going to last me forever, but after the fire we've just eaten through these packs and it's nearly all gone. But luckily we got it, and at least it's all really local. Okay, so I'm not going to spoil it and talk all the way through this, but what you're going to see coming up next is the first stage. Most of the wood in the stack is about 30mm. I'm looking for about 50mm finished, so I'm going to be laminating up for the stiles and the rails. So the first part of this build is getting it all planed up, flat, cut, and then getting it machined ready for the mortising. So this is a kind of D3 expanding foamy style glue, and to be perfectly honest, this is not what I like to use, but at this stage I was trying to use up all the old glue I had for my own laminations. I kind of much prefer using a resin or using like a non-foaming white glue or even Titebond, but this is good and it is a quick set, so sometimes good for the job, but I don't like to clean up. So the way I like to do it, I've done the laminating, left these for a little while. I'll come back to it now. I planed these up both separately, individually, before I laminated it, but now they're going to need to be replaned. Also, I did cut them square before the glue up, but that square edge is going to be determined by how they're planed. So what I do is I'll top and tail them now, just cut the ends roughly to length, then I'll run one side on the planer, then put it under the planer, and then I'll square it up from there, or you can run one side on the planer, square it up on the table saw and do it that way. Whichever way, you need to get one side absolutely flat to reference the other two edges. So that's what you'll see me do, just top and tail it, run it over the planer, run it under the planer, and then cut the final width. Okay, so I do have a SketchUp drawing which I'll show you, but this is kind of what I'm referring to in the shop. Here is the actual opening, the outside. This is what the 4 doors will be. This is each door and the height. There is a minus 15 mil on the top and minus 10 mil on the bottom for this runner system. So that comes off, and then just really clearly label up which doors are going to have the kind of half lap, if you like, joins. So I knew there was going to be lap joints, so I need to make sure that when I cut all these, there's some woodworm and all kinds of stuff. This will definitely be removed in the join, you won't see it. And if I go under here, or when I get to it, I'll show you. I think this one here, you can see it's got a bit of woodworm in it. It's all been treated, but you know, that will get taken off. Now we've got the initial milling done. We've got it planed down, flat, laminated, and ready for machining. The first stage is going to be to cut all the half lap joints in all of the styles. I'm going to do it aqua seal, so 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 mil on top, whatever that is, and then we can minus that. 5, 0, 2, 5. So I'm going to go ahead and mark all of this out just as a kind of backup, but when I'm cutting my mortises, I'm going to use stops so that if there is a mistake, the mistake's the same on all of them. I'm going to set up a stop for the bottom, then change it for the middle, then the top, and everything could be the same. Obviously I've got to get it centered. So I like to mark it out anyway. As I say, literally it's just a backup for mistakes. This is possibly the marking out, which actually, depending what sort of mood you're in, the marking out is quite therapeutic, but this is the part which you wouldn't be doing if you're using a domino. So I guess this is the bit where it's much quicker, because you're going to come in on a domino on the end, and you're going to stick the domino's locator pins into the next one, the next one, the next one, etc. So that bit's quicker, but when you actually start working with the with a mortiser, my one's the FD200, 250, sorry. When you start working, it's much quicker and more repetitive and smoother with a machine, but the laying up is definitely slower. Okay, so there's lots of methods to this, but I find doing each end of the mortise. So I've set up a series of stops on my FD250. I'm going to do a bit of a follow-up video showing you a bit more about it. But basically I'm setting up some stops, and I'm going to do each end cut, and then I'm just going to half break through from each cut to join the two. So it's pretty much that simple. Now I did go back in and then move it along. Benefit of this machine is it can move sideways. Gives you a really clean, really clean slot. Okay, so what you've seen so far is all the work which was carried out before the fire. I've selected the oak, I've machined it down, I've laminated it, I've created the half laps and created the mortises. What I was waiting for, I was struggling with the tenoning, so I ordered some tenoning discs, which you've probably seen now since this video, or before this video rather, from Whitehill. They arrived just shortly after the fire. I hadn't cut the tenons for these mortises. I have obviously now done it because the doors are finished. So from now on, you're going to see new footage of work carried out since the fire. Okay, so while I'm editing this video, it's super odd. Obviously, these doors started their life in a different workshop or different setup. There's been a fire. We're now back in here. I'd already got the bifold system from Henderson's, which I'm going to give you full details about how that works. And I'd obviously already done all the machining of this oak and got it ready. But they were going to occupy a different opening for a different purpose. So I've kind of repurposed them and carried on from there with different machinery. So all very odd watching this back now and editing it. So in videos to come, you're going to see me holding this kind of magic yellow button quite often with this saw, because I'm working in the sort of danger zone, I guess, within the first sort of 20-30 mil of the blade. Select the program, hold the button, and it's going to work really close to the blade. But it is a game changer. I'm cutting rebates here for the glazing, and before the fire and before this saw, I would not have been doing it on a sliding table saw, that's for sure. Okay, this is the last door styles. This is the edge where the regular hinge goes to the frame. Then we've got the glass and the rebate, and then we've got the rail between there, and then this is the next join, half lap for the next door. So I'm going to run a couple of programs on the saw. We're going to run program 1, which is 15 mil in from the fence and 15 mil deep. That's this program here. And then program 2, we need to remove 15 mil, but we've got to take into account the blade's 3.2. So we're going to program the fence to go 11.8 and 30 mil deep, and it will remove all of that waste there. Okay, so why with all this amazing kit am I resorting to a hand plane? Well, the answer is that this didn't survive the fire completely flat, with all of the storage, the heat, the wet, I don't know, there's some cupping. And because there's no kind of power feed on a sliding saw, which would kind of force it flat, like if you had a spindle molder and there was a small cup, the weight of the power feed would force the material through and keep it dead flat. So go back to the good old hand plane and you can sort that out. Okay, so before the fire, I'd been talking to Whitehill about various cutter blocks. I will be doing an in-depth on these groovers here, which I'm using. It's going to give me a step tenon. What that's going to mean is that I can put my glazing units, or even if it was a panel one side, and still get my tenon the other in one go. They are amazing. Now, I had a Hammer F3. I am sure if you go slow enough and don't do it in one like I am here, it would have handled this when I ordered them. I've now got this Profile 45. Obviously, it just eats this, no problem at all. So obviously we don't want the ends of the tenons coming to the edge of the door, so I'm just got a little bit of a template set up here just to haunch them in. So we all work on the basis of sneaking up to the line, but having one of these automated saws, this Altendorf F45, this takes it to another level. It's literally pushing the workpiece over until you get it onto the line. Unbelievable. I love it. Obviously we've heard it all before. These doors were for a different workshop, different opening. I wanted to reuse it and I come up with a new idea. So the bottom rails, the styles, the verticals, we got them now. You've seen that made. The bottom rails, it's only going to have a single side to the tenon. It won't be stepped. And then you're going to see later on in the video, although I've lost some footage, of how I do a resin panel on the back and a tongue and groove on the front. So finally doing the rebates on the rails for the glazing units and for the T&G at the bottom. So finally to the glue up. It's a pretty exciting moment for me. It's almost a year since I come up with the idea of making the doors. Then we had the fire. Now we are finally assembling them for a different spot, but I am really excited. So we're using the West Systems epoxy. It's just a simple pump of the hardener and a pump of the resin. Mix it in the pots. It doesn't like sitting in a pot. It's not a deep pour, so you need to work pretty quickly. You got about half an hour in the pot, a small pot like this. The joy of it is these are pretty tight joints. The resin acts a bit like a lubrication, so when you're pushing together the parts, in most cases it slides together really easily. Okay, so since making this video, there's now 2 of us in the shop. We'll work 3 days a week for Manor Wood, which is brilliant. You can imagine on some tasks, especially glue ups and bigger projects, having 2 sets of hands is just so much easier. Thought I'd show you, this is, Will wasn't here this day, one of the other doors I did on my own. Just show you a solo glue up. This is 8 times faster, so it took about 7 minutes. I would expect with a domino this would take probably about 20 minutes to half an hour. But you do need to take into account the setup time and the cost of machinery for this kind of joint. The other major advantage is the test fit. So the dry fit of these kind of joints, you can bang them in and out, pretty simple. Putting this many dominoes in, maybe 2 or 3 per joint, and trying to remove them before the glue up for the test fit can be a real pain. Now I decided to use the big machines I had and use a more traditional mortise and tenon because I had so many doors and joints to make. I thought it would be a quicker, simpler system. I don't necessarily find it a stronger solution with resin. I'm really enjoying this machine. It's a planer. I've got it set up with a planing head first and a 120 and 180 grit. Pretty much finished as it comes out. Still not as good as a random orbit. For a set of doors though, it's absolutely fine. Now we're moving on to the tongue and groove for the bottom section of the door. Now you're not going to have seen a set of doors made like this. The way I'm going to do this, I'm just going to float these tongue and grooves on the lower section until I pour resin on the back behind them. So very non-traditional way of doing it, but I was trying to go for a very slick, simple, clean line outside, just the T&G and the oak, and on the inside is kind of a little splash of resin. Now these are all the offcuts from different projects of these English planks that I bought. They're all crazy shaped and twisted, so lots of planing. I measure each plank total random width to make sure I don't have too much waste. So I didn't show it on the video, but as you can see, I've actually glued these panels up. I know it's not traditional, and I know people can ask about expansion, but I've not found it a problem where I live, the kind of movement we're going to get. And don't forget, I'm going to pour resin on the back of these panels later in the video, so I need it as watertight joint as possible. Now I agree, this is a bit untraditional at this point, the way we're putting these panels in, not slotting them on the edges, etc. But time is of the essence here. We've got so many doors, windows, glazing, a workshop to build and orders to fulfill, that I kind of thought ahead about what was going to happen with the resin. And basically the resin, when it's been poured, is going to form the seal and the structure of these panels. Okay, so this is an early start and it's freezing in the workshop. This glass cast 3 is a bit cold. If you've got a cold workshop or cold room, good idea is to put it into some warm water. It's much easier to mix and pour. I'm using the weight method here, which is 50:1. Much easier for me on these scales. Make sure I get the mix exactly right. And then it is just a case of making sure you mix the corners of the buckets thoroughly before you put the pigment in. In this case, I'm using Easy Composites silver, which is like a kind of grey finish, and this is just going to be a very small amount just to try and seal the panels. So here I am back at the crack of dawn, trying to catch it at the B stage, so I can now pour the final coat. Lighting's pretty terrible up here. So this is my usual method. If you're used to how I work, what I'm doing is I'm waiting till I feel the resins kind of stiff enough where I can start agitating the pigment to bring it to the surface, trying to put some swirls and patterns in there. It's more a feel and guesswork. There is no time for this. It depends. This is very, very thin, so it was going off very, very slowly in this cold environment. You just get used to it. Practice on small amounts, as I always say. Just doing the test fit now for the doors and the half lap joints. As I said before, if this was all machined up fresh, and plus because it's laminated, it would pretty much be ready to go. These aren't perfect. They have gone through a lot. So I'm just giving them a little tweak, and then by the time I set the hinges on the correct side, everything will be fine. Now making the beading for the windows. The glazing sits on the inside. I'm trying to keep this super slick look on the outside. The gazebo area where it's going is going to be for me to work outdoors but undercover. But it's also for my family. I just want it to look really slick from the outside. Okay, so just before we get on to the fitting of the doors, we're nearly there. We're making a couple of false kind of returns or beams. You'll see we use them for each end of the doorway. We're using the lamello here with the Clamex. This is far and away the best connection for a mitre joint. Really simple, no clamps needed. Absolutely brilliant. A bit of a rub down and a sand while some of the glue's still squeezing out. Get a bit of sawdust in there just to try and help the joint become invisible. So in the spring, on the outside, these OSB panels are going to be meshed and lime mortared. So I picked this Henderson's tangent system. It's very traditional looking, kind of galvanized, reminds me of a traditional garage. I really like the look of it. So this is the first bifold system I've fitted. There's a couple of scratchy head moments, but it pretty much dead straightforward. Has to be that one that has the inside wheel, isn't it? Or is it this next one? I thought it'd look quite slick and industrial against the oak, which I knew I was making. And it is really simple to fit. The hinges are face mount and it's just one pulley. So what we're going to have when you see this on the far left here is kind of pedestrian door, which is just going to be hinged. And then the next three, you've put two on here, they're going to be the folders. So I'll put a link in the description to where I got the bifold system and a link to the PDF if you're interested in it. Now you can see here they don't fold all the way around to 90 degrees. That is because I used a half lap and that bottom connection cannot sit right on the edge of the door. So keep that in mind. If you want your doors to fold all the way back, then you cannot use a half lap because you need the hinge right on the edge.